Welcome everyone. My name is Ben Townsend with Tracker Products. Today is webinar number, oh man, I want to say 24. I'm not sure if it's 23 or 24. I should have looked that up ahead of time, but nonetheless, we're continuing with our webinar series. I want to welcome Krista Morton here with me today, and Krista is with the Des Moines Police Department. Hello, Krista.
Hello.
And so Krista, so today the topic that we're going to cover is inventories, and we've talked a little bit about inventories in previous webinars, but today we're going to dig into it. We're going to dig into best practices, but we're going to relate it to what Des Moines is doing, and I'm going to show you a lot of statistical information that I garnered from Des Moines data. As I've said probably many times, I love statistical data. I love looking at things like this and trying to figure out how things are working. So I'm going to show you all sorts of statistics, and we're going to break down what Des Moines is doing when it comes to evidence. So Krista, I want to say thank you ahead of time for being willing to open yourself up to critique and what you're doing. And it's not my intent to look at your process and tell you what you're doing wrong. I'm simply, you know, people like to know what other people are doing and what can be done to be better. So I'm trying to wrap both of those around what we're doing here today. So again, I can't thank you enough because so few people are willing to open up what they do, and you've been very gracious in doing this now multiple times. So thank you for being here.
No problem. Anything to make it run smoothly.
Okay, well, I will say for anybody that's a client of Tracker Products, when you are consistently involved with webinars like that, Krista gets a front row seat to updates that she wants done in the system. And so the other day, I had a call with Krista about, I don't even know what we were talking about, but we got talking about updates to the system. And there was a couple of things we're going to do specifically for Krista in Des Moines. And that's because Krista has been such a faithful participant in doing these things. So Krista, that is your prize or your pay for being involved in these things is you get moved to the front of the line with things that you would like done.
Thank you.
You're well. You didn't even know that was that case, but that's no. How high you are up on the list around here. So for everybody else, if you do multiple of these webinars, you get moved up in the priority list. So again, Krista Morton with Des Moines, and so let's start out real quickly. I don't want to just assume that everybody knows what an inventory is, because there's generally a misunderstanding, not generally, but sometimes there's a misunderstanding between an inventory, an audit, and a random inventory. So just very quickly, I want to break these things down and define what each one of those are. First is the inventory, which is what our topic is here today. An inventory is when you basically check every item in a location, or hopefully you get to a point where you check every item in every location to find out, is it where it's supposed to be? Is it present in the room? An inventory is every item. And so a subcomponent of that, sorry, hold on one second here. I guess Krista may have got called off to something there.
Yeah, somebody I got pounding on the door and then a phone call. So sorry, I had to take it real quick.
That is no problem at all. We'll keep moving along here. So that's an inventory. An audit is very different than an inventory. An audit is when you're checking policies and procedures. Are you complying with what you are supposed to be complying with? Maybe a small part of an audit would be going around and looking at some pieces of evidence, but generally a part of an audit is not going to be an entire inventory of what is going on. Now, an audit may be checking to make sure you're doing the inventories as you're supposed to be doing them, but that's where an audit would the technical definition of an audit would come into place. And then the last one, and we'll talk a little bit about this today, a random inventory, that's where we spot check a subcomponent of all of my evidence. So that may look like, you know, the boss comes in one day and says, hey, I need you to randomly generate a list of 100 pieces of evidence, and I'm going to go into the room and check and see if those 100 pieces of evidence are where they're supposed to be. And so certainly a random inventory is much less complex than what a full-blown inventory is. Now, I'm a firm believer all three of those should be taking place fairly consistently, and we'll get in some of the policies and procedures behind that. First, I want to throw out just guidelines, okay? This is just good for everybody to know. I got this from Sean at the Evidence Management Institute, who is also somebody that I have on here very often. When it comes to doing inventories, the best practice for inventory is that all evidence is inventoried at least one time a year. Okay. Now, some people may choke at that idea and say, I can't do that, or it's not possible to be done. I'm just saying the gold standard is that every piece of evidence is inventoried one time a year. The next level down, if you cannot do every piece of evidence, the next level down would be all guns, drugs, money, and biological evidence are inventoried at least one time a year, and everything else less frequently. And so I don't know what less frequently would be, whether that's like every 2 or 3 years, but I would certainly say you want to be in a position where guns, drugs, money, and biological evidence are inventoried at least once every year. And now he's got some additional guidelines that go along with that would say you should also apply these if there's a change in position, leadership, anything else that might require a redo of all of that. And so bottom line is you want to be in a position to very quickly, as quick as you possibly can, be able to do a full-blown inventory of your evidence. And so today we're going to talk about how do you go get that, how do you go about getting that done so that if something like that does come up, you're ready to go. Maybe you're in a position where you've never done an inventory or an audit, and this will be sort of your foray into that. These things are absolutely critical. My personal opinion is this is the second most important thing that you can organize and make a part of technology in your evidence room. The first would be auto disposition, getting your disposition process moving very well. This to me is the second most important thing you can be doing. All right, I will post that link. I don't know that I can copy that off of here. I will post that link at the end of this webinar. I'll put that in the community group, that link down there at the bottom to the EMI standards and best practices. That way everybody's got a link to what those best practices and policies are, okay? So let's talk. I want to open this up a little bit to Krista. So Krista, let's talk a little bit about, I need you, first of all, you've been in the evidence room for a very long time, right? How long have you been running or been involved in the evidence room at Des Moines?
25 years.
Good. So if I were to ask you to go back to when you didn't have technology, when maybe it was more paper-based, the discussion I want to have right now is I want to try to draw out some of the key differences between having technology and not having technology. So how far back do you have to go to get to a point where doing an inventory, did you do inventories without any level of technology in place?
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, well, we couldn't because we had to generate our list through technology.
Okay.
But we did have the books when I first came. I don't know if ever we had a big evidence logbook, and then we had paper, and we did not do any type of inventory until we finally got our first technical logging where we put it in the computer where we could generate a list.
Sure.
And I was already with the department probably close to 10 years before we did an inventory.
Sure. And so when you did get that system and it was able to generate a list, was your first inventory walking around with a piece of paper and checking everything off? And would you even have an idea of how long it would take to inventory the entire evidence room at that point in time? Just give us a quick explanation of what that looked like, if anything.
We just did locations. I would print out a list of everything in that location, took that piece of paper and looked for it and checked it off. And then once we had it, we had to research the ones that were there that shouldn't have been there or the ones that we didn't find. And then you had to research everything. So it was timely.
Okay. So let's fast forward to now. And I guess the argument that I'm going to make here, if you're in a position, if you're watching this webinar and you're in a position where you do not have an evidence management system or you're not doing inventories, not doing inventories is really not good. It's not good when you're not doing those things. I just repeated myself there. It's double not good. That's how not good it is to not do. It's twice as bad. And so when you move into a world of technology, just walk us through, what does an inventory look like now? And I know in a minute we're going to run through some videos of what those look like, but how big a difference is it today from what it used to be?
Oh, it's much easier. It's quicker. Just scanning everything is just huge, and having the computer find the discrepancies. It's night and day, and it's more accurate, you know, because there's errors because you can misread the numbers, the accuracy of it, and just the speed, and one person is doing it. Because we'd always have two people go back and doing it. One was reading, one was finding. Now one person can just go back. So you're saving manpower by having only one person do it instead of two. And it just, yeah, much better. I would not want to go back to the old way.
Excellent. Well, good. We don't want you to go back to the old way. So let's talk very quickly about your setup. And this is, so Krista and I had a conversation earlier today where I ran through some of the stats that I had and got a little bit of information from her. So just so everybody knows, there are 5 what I'll call main areas or categories of evidence within the Des Moines PD. And next to each one of them, I listed how often they will inventory each one of those. And so, for example, the first one is drugs. And in drugs, as I mentioned earlier, guns, drugs, money, and biological evidence. Usually drugs and guns and money and those things are toward the top of the list. So Des Moines will inventory their drugs 2 times per year. And that's how often you do dispositions. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
So you'll check everything out. You'll make sure every drug is where it's supposed to be before you get into the disposition process. That's done twice a year. The money is done once per year, roughly. That one's a little bit more flexible. And then your other 3 main areas, where you title them as main, basement, and upper, basically every year you try to knock out one of those key sections. And so ultimately what that means is at the end of 3 years, you've inventoried 1 time main, 1 time basement, 1 time upper. You will have done 6 inventories on drugs, and you will have done 3 inventories on money. Do I have that roughly laid out correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And so now I'm just curious, do you have a written policy? Do you have anything that states this is how we're going to go about doing what we're doing? Or are you just operating off of best practices? I'm just curious, do you have a policy in place to state how you do what you do?
No, we do not at this time. I believe we probably will have one coming. But no, it's just something I want to have done. If we could do it more often, if we had the manpower to do it more often, we'd probably inventory more, but be able to maintain our work and inventory, that's why we do it the way we do it.
Sure. Okay. Well, and so I would encourage, if anybody has written policies. Now, again, I know that Sean has best practices laid out there. Later on, when I post the message in the community group, if anybody has any policies that they want to post up there, people love getting policies from other people. I guarantee you there are people on here that don't have a policy, and the best way to create a policy is copy what somebody else has done. So I would certainly appreciate anybody that would be willing to post their policy out on the community group so that other people can take advantage of that. But let's dig into some statistics. This is what I love. I love digging into this stuff, and this is where we really get down into the nuts and bolts of what their inventories produce and what it looks like. So I just want to go through some of these things, and Krista, you can comment on any of these as they come up. I'll probably ask you some questions about them, but for now I'm just going to read through them. So first of all, the Des Moines Police Evidence, it's important to know they have 2.5 full-time staff running their evidence operation. And that's important because every statistic below that really is you got to keep in mind the context. You know, it's not like they have a dozen people in the evidence room. They got 2.5 full-time people. Do I have that right, Krista? Do you still have 2.5 full-time people?
Yeah, the same.
Okay, so 2.5 full-time people. Right now, today, I ran these stats this morning. They have 39,704 checked-in items in the evidence room. Now, in the last 365 days, they've added 18,343 items. I did run one more stat below that. Of those 18,343 items, 13,381 of them are still checked in, which means roughly 5,000 of the items brought in the last year have already been disposed of. And the good news is they have disposed of 20,265 items in the last 365 days, which ultimately means they are disposing of more evidence than what is coming in the door. And that is one of the most critical factors right there for a healthy evidence organization. You are getting rid of more than what you're bringing in. And so that means it might only be to a slight degree, but you are opening space up. You are not in that situation where we're running out of room and they're building buildings to accommodate what we're doing. So good job, Krista. I'm glad to see that. That is an indicator of a healthy organization. Now, breaking that down from there, that means every working day of the year, 261 working days a year on average, they're bringing in 70 items and they're getting rid of 77. Now, keep in mind, 70 items coming in per day, you got 2.5 staff to deal with intake and all the other things that go into it. So I just want to give you an idea of that. Now, when you get into the inventories, now we're going to dig into some numbers for the inventory section. Des Moines, Krista and her group did 372 inventories last year. Now, the way they do their inventories, in fact, right 2 lines below that, I indicate they have 939 distinct locations in their evidence room that have at least one piece of evidence. So ultimately, if you take their 39,700 items and divide it by 939 storage locations, on average, they have 42 pieces of evidence in every storage location. So of those 939 storage locations, they have inventoried roughly 372 of those in the last year. Now, I was able to pull all of this out of the database of the system. I don't know, Krista, did any of these numbers, when I threw them at you, did anything stand out? Was it shocking? Was it good? How did you feel when you looked at those numbers?
I guess I did not realize that we've been getting rid of that much stuff. I mean, it looks good.
Getting rid of stuff, you don't even know how much you're getting rid of.
No, I just follow that little graph on the tracker thing and I see the little peaks and stuff like that. So I just follow, but as far as numbers, I had no idea.
Okay, well, and you know what? So again, some of this stuff I'm getting from the database, so it's not quite as easy to just get all of this stuff from the interface. But the thing I did want to throw out is in the last year, they did do 372 inventories. Those are so again, that's 372 storage locations that have roughly 42 pieces of evidence per every storage location. And so that equated out to roughly 19,820 items have been inventoried in the last 365 days. Now, my quick math tells me that means about half of their evidence has been inventoried in the last year. That is what it is. Those are the facts of what is going on. And so now I did run one more statistic down at the bottom, and I threw this out to Krista as we were getting on the call here today. If these numbers are all correct, and I'm fairly confident they are, I got them directly out of the database. If every location has roughly 42 items, and if it took roughly 5 minutes to inventory every one of those locations, and Krista, if there were 40 items, I mean, you've done some inventories. If there were 42 items in a location with the mobile app that you have, you think you could pull off an inventory in 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I felt like that was a good number. I certainly don't think it's going to take 10 or 20 minutes. I thought 5 was a good number. So if that number is roughly correct, and in an 8-hour working day, if Krista was using that mobile app and she didn't stop or slow down to any degree for 8 hours a day, it would take almost 10 working days to inventory the entire evidence room. Now, the reason I threw that out that way is because Krista may think, my goodness, our evidence room is large. We've got almost 40,000 items. How would I ever get through it? Do you find that? I'm just wondering, do you buy that number? I mean, first of all, it is a fact. I mean, those are the numbers. Could you imagine just clocking away at this for 10 straight days and doing the entire inventory? One person.
No, because it's not that simple.
Yeah.
I mean, because you end up, you gotta do the discrepancies.
Yes.
So once you get the discrepancies of figuring out, oh, there's issues with something, time you investigate it, you got that time. Doing a straight inventory, yes, but unfortunately, why we're doing inventory is to catch our mistakes. So we have to fix our mistakes.
And that's true. Every one of those discrepancies is going to add an amount of time to it. And you've also got the reality in the case of Des Moines, a lot of their legacy evidence isn't quite as well organized and packaged as well as the new stuff coming in. So they've got the constant process of cleaning up that really, really old stuff. But it still gives you an idea. I mean, when you take all these numbers and you start breaking them down into the lowest common denominators, I just find it interesting to come up with something like that, and it gives you sort of an idea of where you're at. So, well, good. That's just some straight statistics on the evidence room. I do have a video. I want to show this off, and Krista, I'm going to ask you to hold on one second here. Let me see if I can get this video up here. 1 second. So hopefully this video comes across well for everybody. Excellent. So this video that I'm going to show off here is actually, so I asked Krista yesterday to take the mobile app, the Safe mobile app, and just so everybody knows, I try not to focus on our software too very often, but sometimes when you're showing off technology and how it helps with inventories, I show off our software. So Krista somebody is recording Krista doing an inventory of roughly 8 items in the evidence room. So Krista, I'm going to turn off the audio. I don't know if yes, I'm going to try to turn the audio off, and let's just walk us through what's happening as we get going on this thing. So we have an evidence location here. So there is our mobile app. And so Krista's going in. I'm sorry, I asked you to do it, but maybe easier for me just to give you a play-by-play. So Krista's going to go into the mobile app on her phone and start an inventory. And so again, an inventory is we go through and we scan every barcode on every location, and it's dumping that information directly into the app on the phone. Krista, anything you want to add about that process as we're going along?
Nope, it's just fairly simple. Just the big thing too is making sure the labels are flat.
Yeah.
And then it goes really quick. And these are a bunch of our older cases, as you can see, where we've added labels.
Yeah.
So
now, I will say, one thing that stood out to me was as she's going through using the mobile app, there is no way that taking a picture of the mobile app and rendering the barcode is going to be quite as quick as using a barcode scanner device. And so I would certainly, for those of you that are using our software, if you are scanning hundreds of items, I might still suggest that using the scanner device with your computer or even an iPhone is going to be significantly faster. And so in this case, though, it works really well when I've got 8 items or 40 items. You can get that done pretty quickly. Now, what I would suggest is the most critical piece of using the mobile app, and so you can see on the screen right here, once she's done doing the scanning, it comes back with a list of every item that was scanned. It tells you where you're doing the inventory at. And what I think is the most important part of doing this is it's going to bring back the discrepancies on her screen. She doesn't have to leave and go back to her computer or another device to get the results. When she clicks that run report button down there at the bottom, it is going to come back and tell her the results of that inventory. And I sort of paused it right there. The very bottom line, the one in red, it shows 0 discrepancies. You can see it shows on the screen. She scanned I'm sorry, here, let me get back to that. Yes, she scanned 8 items and it found no problems. And that really becomes nice because now I can just run right on to the next location. We're going to start a new report and move right into the next location. We don't have to go back to the computer to get these results. And the reason I make that a big deal is because our legacy product, the old PDA device, that's how you had to do it. So imagine this scenario where you do all of that scanning, you go back to the computer, you dock the cradle, all that information's uploaded, and then you get your report, and you're doing that for every location. And so this is going to be significantly faster. And again, I want to overemphasize that getting the results on the screen is sort of the crescendo to that whole thing and getting valid data back. So in this particular location with 8 items, there were no errors, and now Krista can move on to the next inventory. So now let me go back here and start displaying my screen here again. So what happens is, at least within our software, not only are you doing the inventories on each one of these locations, but then all of those statistics are stored back into the software. And so I just took a quick screenshot of the user interface. These are all the inventories that Des Moines is doing. So you can see just yesterday, Nick did an inventory on, I'm seeing 4 different locations up there at the top. One had 7 items in it. So this column, let me see if I can get my mouse over here. That column right there is showing how many items were in that location: 7, 6, 6, and 15. So, you know, 32 items, 35 items got inventoried yesterday, and there were only 1 discrepancy found. Now that takes me on to the next screen here, because now we get into, this is what the report would look like if there were discrepancies. A moment ago, Krista showed us a perfect inventory. And of course, she's going to send me a video of a perfect inventory. This is what a not perfect inventory would look like. We're seeing actual information on the screen that tells us what the problems are, you know, because that's the purpose of an inventory. What are my problems? And so in this case right here, I have generated a report that shows every possible inventory problem. You know, the first one, you scanned an invalid barcode. And that can happen many times when you get a package back from the lab and they put their barcode on it. People sometimes will accidentally scan the wrong barcode. And so the report will show you, hey, you scanned a barcode that we don't recognize. And so now you know that's got to be dealt with. The next and the most common one is you've got items in a wrong location in your evidence room. So, you know, you simply get these things to where they belong, and then they won't show up in errors when you do the next inventory in that room. There was one more down at the bottom. You scanned some items that were marked checked out. I mean, again, these are the important pieces of doing an inventory. What are my problems? A couple of more down here at the bottom. You scanned some disposed items. Somebody marked an item disposed of, and somehow it's still sitting on the shelf. And then probably the more common one, the bottom one at the bottom, these items were not scanned and they should have been in that storage location. So I won't bring up the inventory that Des Moines did the other day, but there was one error in it, and there's nothing wrong with errors. I mean, it's supposed to tell you what the problems are. So you simply go about getting these things resolved, and this gets you a lot closer to things being where they need to be, so that when it comes time to doing a random inventory, everything is where it's supposed to be. Now, one thing I did, Krista, I didn't tell you I was going to do this, and I wanted to go in and check, because if your policy or your desire is that every 3 years you scan every piece of evidence, right? I mean, you would agree with that. At the end of a 3-year period of time, you should have done everything.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did, I wanted to check. I wanted to bring up a couple of pieces of evidence. So what I did was I took one of your officers. I just randomly grabbed an officer, and I had to check a couple of them because I didn't know if they'd been there for 3 years. But this Curtis guy, he entered evidence more than 3 years ago. So what I did was I went in and I did a search for every piece of evidence he's ever entered that's older than 1,050 days, which is 3 years, and it's still checked in. So it came back with a list of 47 items. You still have 47 items in the evidence room from that guy older than 3 years that are still checked in. Now, you get a sense of what I was looking for here. These things, when I bring up one of them, it should have been involved in an inventory. And that's one of the things our software does. So I think I took the 4th item on the list there, that cell phone, and I went in and brought up that item and looked at the scan history tab. And I can tell that on May 29th of 2019, this item was involved in the discrepancy report that Rena Thomas did, and it showed up as no errors, which means that item was where it was supposed to be. And so that is an audit right there. I'm auditing the process. So Krista, I'm happy to let you know I checked 5 different items, and all 5 of them showed up in an inventory. So
Awesome.
I was gonna say that's good. That is me affirming that your process, at least with a check of 5 items. Now, if I checked 100, who knows? But at least checking 5 items let me know that all 5 of those items did show up in an inventory at some point in time. So now, I will say, I'd love to see that you're doing full-blown inventories every year, and then I can bring up any piece of evidence older than a year and see that it's in an audit. But that's something for down the road for you. Okay.
What I'd like to do is do the audits, you know, do inventory a room and then do audits on the other two.
Yep. So I did want to show off real quick, because one of the things that our software will allow you to do, if you get into these random audits or random inventories, now we do call this an audit because you're checking against several different policies that are in place. So within our software, you could go in and do something. Chris, I don't even know if you know this exists. So this may be training for you, because this is something that recently came into our software. But in the toolbar, there is a random audit function now. And you are able to go in and say, I want to do and I'm going to call this report a drug random audit. And I'm going to select the item category of drugs. And I'm going to say something like, give me a list of 10% of all that evidence. And so it'll come back with a list. Now, I probably wouldn't do, 332 items. I would probably do something that has 20 or 30 on it. And in this case, I did generate something that had 10 items on it. So this is where you would go into the room and you would check every item. And you'll notice over in that right-hand column over there, we worked with Sean at the Evidence Management Institute to come up with some audit mechanisms so that if you decided to run this report, you could pick 10 items and go in and then indicate with each one of these items, did you find it in under 5 minutes? Was it found in its proper location? Was it labeled according to standard? And is it eligible for disposition? Those are just 4 categories of things we picked. And so this would be a good way to do a random audit. It would be a random inventory if all you were doing is the item found in the proper location. But because we added some of those other variables, we felt pretty comfortable calling it an audit. Okay. So that is the last thing I wanted to show off. Krista, did you have anything else you wanted to throw out about your process? I know I just sort of blew through all of that right there. I mean, anything else you want to offer to people, things you've learned over the years that would be helpful?
Not that I can think of. We did go to a class. If we can't find something, there's a form that we're going to start using of like Nick looked for it or my assistant looked for it. I looked for it. So we have some kind of record of everything we did for missing property.
Sure.
So we're going to start using this form to keep it instead of just making a note. So we can say we looked in the case file, we got a hold of the detective, just some more documentation on things if we do come up with missing.
And just so you know, for everybody that's watching, now's a great time to jump in with questions. So if you've got any questions, I see a few of them have come in here and I'll read those out to Krista in just a moment. Krista, would you mind, is that like a Word document template form?
Yeah, I can scan it and send it to you.
If you wouldn't mind.
Is that what you want me to do?
I'm sure people would love for me to put that up on our community board. So yeah, if you don't mind sending me a copy of that form, I'll throw that up on the community board too.
Okay, yeah, I'll find it and send it to you.
Okay, so the first question that came in from Dave Schweitzer out in Orange, California, he asked, do you only use property room employees for an inventory, or do you ever bring any outside people in to help?
No, it's just us.
Yeah, so so one of your 2.5 people are pretty consistently doing inventories.
Yeah, because we would have to be with them for the integrity of our property room. Yeah. One of us, somebody in our office would have to be there. So it's just as easy if we just would go do it.
Yeah. Now I do know, I mean, I'm sure there are people on here that I do know people have used. They've brought in third party. I've just seen all sorts of situations where people will bring in help for something like that. Yeah, I've even seen people bring in volunteers. Now I have no idea. I have no idea what they had to go through to get them authorized or whatever else to get that done. But I'm certain that has happened and is going on out there. Krista, you don't seem to be sold on that idea.
No.
Yeah. I do understand that.
Yeah, we get people not happy with us when it's like, you need to leave the room. What? And it's like, nope, we're not in here. We're leaving. You're leaving. Sorry, you can't stay.
Now I will tell you. So Dave from Orange just responded with this question. He said their policy is that it has to be outside employees like detectives and cadets. So they're not they're not just going. Now, I will say I've seen a lot of people use cadets in the evidence room just in depart, train them and bring them in. So, but then he also says they have to watch them all the time. So my guess is they're not just letting them go into the evidence room and do whatever they want. But that might be, I could imagine in a scenario like Krista, where if you bring in a cadet, you're getting 2 inventories done for the price of 1. So like Krista could be there with that cadet. They're doing one shelf, she's doing the shelf to the left of them, and you're knocking out 2 at a time versus just you doing 1, and you're watching them in part of that.
Well, I can see why they're doing it. They're trying to maintain the integrity of the room, to not give too much control over the people running the evidence room. So if you have somebody from the outside come doing it, they're checking, like me. So somebody outside would be checking my work to make sure everything is kosher.
Sure. Somebody else, so Dave Bragg at Bowling Green, he brought up, he asked, how long are these inventories in safe? And so I don't know if people know that or not, because especially in regard to our legacy product. In our legacy product, we allowed you to delete a report. In the new safe system, which probably most of you are already using, we do not delete reports. They're there for forever. And the reason we do that is so that when you bring up an individual piece of evidence and you look at that scan history, we want you to be able to go back 10 years. So there is an option to hide the report or to mark it done, and that way it's not showing in your active list, but those reports are there for forever, and we always want them to be there. The other thing that enforces, and the reason we did it this way, is because if something comes up wrong, we want that to be there for forever. Now, some people may say, whoa, wait a minute, I don't like that idea. If there's a mistake, I want to be able to correct it. We allow you to note that on the report. I mean, Krista, you guys have come up with problems, and you simply go in and put a note in there. Nobody is ever going to ding you ever for, I couldn't find a piece of evidence. It took us a week. We found it. Here's what's going on. But what they will nail you for is when you've lost a piece of evidence and now all of a sudden you're going out of your way to make sure that is not known. And so that's why we simply don't allow that in our software to remove those things. It's because we want that record to be there forever. So David, I know that I just overstated that, but I just want to let people know, I think that is critical to have those records in there permanently, because I can't tell you how many times, and it's been more for the sake of, you know, getting somebody into a position of helping them than I've ever had a phone call where somebody went rogue because, you know, and then the chief called us up and we found out they were going rogue. It's always, we've cleared somebody because we have a valid track record of what's going on, and that's what we want. Any news out of Louisville, Krista? Are they flashing anything on the screens?
Sorry.
That's all right. I'm serious. Like, I don't know if they've made an announcement yet. All right. So somebody else posted, Craig Greenberg, thanks for your post. He said they do a 51% inventory every 6 months. Will the random audit scanning page do all the items in 1 year? So Craig, my answer to that would be that random audit, you could do every piece of evidence on it, but because it is an audit and you're doing way more than you're doing in an inventory, I would not imagine you would do what we call a random audit to do the entire evidence room. I think you do what we call a discrepancy report, where you just scan every barcode, it comes back with a report, and then your audit is a subcomponent of that. You'll do that less frequently. My imagination is if you did that, what we call a random audit, it would just take you, you couldn't get it done. It would just take forever. It would be significantly longer than doing a full-blown inventory with the discrepancy report and then doing the random audit below it. Okay. Let me see here if I got any others. So Dave back from Orange posted, he's doing an inventory right now, and they have 4 people that are on it, and they have 100,000 items they're doing an inventory on. So I'm curious, Dave, can you throw out, are you printing out paper, or are you going around checking everything? Are you doing the inventory? I know you're in our legacy product, so your answer is going to be a little bit different anyways. So Dave Bragg and Bowling Green, they have over 100,000 pieces of evidence in their evidence room, and they've got a new chief coming in, and they're doing 100% inventory on everything. Dave, would you mind telling me, I'm just curious, with 100,000 items using our technology, you have any idea how long it's going to take you to get 100% inventory done for your entire evidence room? I'm just, because I know Dave's only got 2 people in their evidence room. So, and they've got a lot more evidence. So let me see what those answers are coming in. Pronounce go back there. So it looks like Dave answered, but I didn't quite follow what his answer is. So Dave told me they have 49,000 items. Okay, so 49,000 items, Dave. Any idea how long that's going to take you to get that done? I'm just curious if he comes back and tells me 10 days. You know, maybe he's hammering away at that, and who knows. All right. I'm sure he's not doing it in 10 days. I'll bet you it's taking him 60 to 90 days. So I haven't heard back from him, but I'm going to guess that's somewhere in that ballpark. All right. Well, I do believe we have sufficiently covered inventories here today. I hope everybody is always my hope that we've shown something or said something that is of value and you can take it back and apply it to your scenario. If you're a client of ours and there's anything I can help you out with, certainly let me know, even if it's getting some of those statistics that I got here for Krista today. If there's any of that you're interested in, let me know. I'm happy to hop into the system and get some of that. I may make you get on a webinar to get those statistics, but I'm just kidding. I won't do that. We'll give you the statistics. But
do one on all of the widgets you can do.
I was going to say, because a lot of that is in there. Yes. So somebody else threw out with the Davie PD that they did one at the end of December and it took about 3 months. So, you know, Bridget, thanks for giving that. I would have a ton of questions to ask about that. Like, you know, what does your automated system look like? They're saying 45,000 pieces of evidence. She may be a client of ours. I apologize. I don't know everybody like I used to know. So, all right. Well, for everybody that showed up, thank you so much for being here today. Again, I hope this was valuable, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks with another webinar. So keep an eye on the community forum. We'll post some of the forms we talked about here today. Krista, if you wouldn't mind sending me a scanned copy of that, the lost property form that you use, I'd love to post that out there. And okay. If anybody else needs anything, certainly let me know. Thank you and have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Thank you.